Trump ordering the U.S. military to invade Venezuela. 17 airstrikes. I'm Patrick Lancaster with breaking news. Is the United States about to invade Venezuela? Is it imminent? Well, the Senate has just voted against a war powers resolution that would have restricted Trump's ability to move in and invade Venezuela. The resolution failed 49 to 51.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 51, and the motion is not agreed to.
So simply put, the last roadblock to Trump ordering the U.S. military to invade Venezuela, both legally and politically, has been passed. And now there's just simply nothing in the way of Trump invading Venezuela right now. And in this report, we're going to be talking about where we are now and how it got to this point. The naval buildup by the United States, the attacks on civilian boats, and the drug war narrative, and how this could quickly turn into a Panama-style invasion. And we're going to be looking at what's possibly next. Okay, what just happened in the Senate? Well, a bipartisan war powers resolution was voted on, and I said it failed 49 to 51. And this war powers resolution was aimed to force Trump to get congressional authorization before launching strikes within or against Venezuela. Now, all of the Democrats, of course, voted to restrict Trump's powers here, and actually 2 Republicans joined them in their vote basically against Trump and against giving him more powers, but it still failed. What does this mean? It means that Trump can continue to escalate military operations in and around Venezuela and against Venezuela, framed as anti-drug or counterterrorism without a specific war vote in the Senate or Congress. So what is the War Power Resolution? Well, it's a law that was enacted in 1973 with a purpose of stopping U.S. presidents from dragging the U.S. into an undeclared war or wars. So on paper, Congress still has these powers, but in reality, the Senate, by this vote, has now signaled that they are not going to use this war powers resolution to restrict or stop Trump from moving against Venezuela. And many of you know this is not just a hypothetical war or hypothetical military operation. Since September, the United States has launched at least 17 airstrikes on boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing a reported 69 people, mostly from Venezuela and Colombia. And the extent of their involvement in these so-called drug trafficking, or the purpose of these attacks in the drug narrative, has not been made fully clear. And basically, the United States has shown no public evidence that these people killed in these airstrikes were drug traffickers. And UN experts on human rights have called these extrajudicial executions. So there's a lot of blurred lines getting crossed now in international law. And for now, the US is calling this a war on drugs, but many are calling it just a war on people in small boats. But when that line gets crossed going against the Venezuela government and military, how big will this get? We don't quite know yet. So let's look at the U.S. naval buildup off the coast of Venezuela. In mid-August, the U.S. deployed at least 8 warships, 1 fast attack submarine, and 4,500 soldiers and Marines. sanctions. Now, there's been reactions from Venezuela to this as well. In fact, Venezuela overflew with one of their F-16s, a U.S. destroyer, and the U.S. called it very highly provocative. And Venezuela said that the U.S. boarded a tuna vessel for 8 hours, and they called it totally illegal and hostile. And former U.S. officials have come out as saying this is gunboat diplomacy, but the real message is that the oil infrastructure of Venezuela is in the United States crosshairs. What was the lead up to here? Well, in 2019, the U.S. recognized the opposition presidential candidate as the interim president and labeled Maduro as the illegitimate president and tied on sanctions. And among these were oil sanctions and asset freezes that later studies linked to a worsening humanitarian collapse that led to tens of thousands of deaths. And let's fast forward to Trump's second term. He reimposes maximum pressure and puts tariffs on countries buying oil from Venezuela and raises the reward on Maduro to $50 million. And people are accusing the Trump administration of not having an anti-drug operation, but implementing a military arm of a long-running regime change attempt that failed with sanctions and is now moving into open military force. Trump's drug war, now an armed conflict. Trump notified Congress in October that the U.S. is now in a non-international armed conflict with narcotics cartels in the Caribbean. And once you say armed conflict, it makes the killing of unarmed people, well, at least people that aren't shooting back out at sea, a little bit easier as far as international and law of war goes. So basically, the administration told Congress that the U.S. is now at war with unlawful combatants, and Congress shrugged and said, okay, carry on. Well, basically, that they're not going to stop Trump from doing this further. So is the invasion of Venezuela by the U.S. military imminent? That's the big question. Well, U.S. media and think tanks are openly discussing the possibilities of how it would actually go. Maduro is expecting it, he has stated, and reports say that Washington has already identified land targets and is moving towards the actual process of the invasion itself. And many analysts have suggested that the invasion of Venezuela by U.S. forces could be over in a matter of hours, with the Venezuela going up against U.S. F-35s, cruise missiles, land forces, and more. But the regime change could trigger a prolonged insurgency and chaos. And we've seen that before, and we know how that ends up. So what could stop this at this point? Well, the War Powers Resolution technically still exists, but the Senate just refused to enforce it. But Venezuela still has the backing of Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, etc. And any U.S. attack risks a proxy confrontation and further escalation. So basically, if tonight Trump says that Maduro's military bases and anti-air systems are linked to narcotics trafficking or terrorism, then basically there was no one left to say, no, don't move U.S. forces in. And how is this going to affect the normal people in Venezuela? Well, there's been an economic collapse in Venezuela. Well, reportedly, we get other information when we talk to people that are actually on the ground. But of course, war and sanctions affect people. So, of course, if there's an armed conflict, civilians are going to die. And that's a horrible thing. And we hope that doesn't happen. War sucks. Just hopefully civilians cease to being caught in the crosshairs. And what's the fallout? Well, this has already affected the price of oil in a big way. I believe one day had an increase in 5%. So and the conflict hasn't even started yet. So just imagine what's going to happen when the U.S., if the U.S. moves in. I think most people think it's going to happen at this point. And the U.S. has had a long history of military interventions in Latin America, and none of them really turned out that well. So is the invasion of Venezuela by the U.S. military imminent? Well, no one can give you an exact date, but after this vote in the Senate, there is literally nothing standing between a war on drugs in the off the coast of Venezuela and a full-scale war with Venezuela. Nothing stopping. There's no stopping point between those two. So we hope war doesn't come. So unfortunately, you can see that when a country puts warships off a country's coast and attacks their ships, blows their ships up with airstrikes, and that country's government does not implement any real checks or says, okay, you've got carte blanche to do what you want without Congress approval, then it's only going to turn out one way. We've seen that in how many countries before? So you let us know what you think. Comment below. Do you think this is about drugs, democracy, or resources? And what's really behind this? What do you think? And I hope you got something out of this report. I try to give you something from a little different angle than you're used to that you won't get. Unfortunately, I'm not on the ground now. Also comment below, should I go to Venezuela and report there? What do you think? And let me know what you think of this report. So make a bunch of comments. Let me know everywhere what you think and you know what I need to do next. So also please hit that like button and of course subscribe if you're new. We've got so much material coming. I just try to get the most out of you and I do my best to get the information you're not going to see in other places. So let's show the world together, whether it's Venezuela, Russia-Ukraine war, or whatever. I do my best for you because you're my boss. I'm only supported by you, and I only answer to you. So you can support my work with the link in the description on the screen or in the pinned comments. Let's do this together. We're a big team.